Welcome back. Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about the Trump administration and the USA chart, and we're going to examine or compare the charts of Trump, the Trump administration, the USA chart, and Vladimir Putin. So let's go ahead and get started. This is the inauguration chart for Donald J. Trump, January 20th, 2017, in Washington, D.C. With the exception of the Biden administration, the inaugurations are predictably and traditionally held at noon, which means that we are always, and on this day, so we are always going to have the sun at the very top of the chart at 0 Aquarius, indicating a brand new beginning. Now, symbolically, this is very interesting because Aquarius rules groups and progress and democracy, right? Or democratic activities. Anything involving team meetings is going to come under Aquarius. So with 0 degrees Aquarius, this literally is perfectly symbolic of a brand new group administration that will be responsible for running the country. Now, all of this, of course, is theoretical, so take anything I say with a grain of thought, and certainly you can apply your own understanding to it or theories. But here's what I can tell you. The inauguration chart should not only give us an indication of the health of our leader, not necessarily physically, but just in terms of leadership during their 4-year term, or that particular 4-year term. But it should also give us an indication of the administration and what they're working with in terms of the teams around them, not just the ones they hand select for themselves, but also the entire body of Congress. And we're going to talk about that when we get down to the video for Biden, because the void of course moon is an interesting little tidbit that needs to be discussed in that regard. Okay, so with that said, so if the sun, and the sun does, at the top of this chart, the midheaven, represents the leadership, right? The first thing that we're looking at is we've got not such a great situation here. So we have a hidden T-square. So the sun is at 0, which also could be very, very late Capricorn, and it is close enough. It's wide, but we give a 10-degree orb with the sun, so it is pulling in Jupiter and Uranus in the 12th and the 6th house. So right here, this suggests to us that our leadership, the sun, is in a position where there is some service that's being offered and some behind the scenes things that are happening that are driving or creating critical mass or pressure on his leadership during this administration. With Jupiter in, hang on, let me get that so I can see what I'm looking at. With Jupiter in Libra, right, in the 6th house, this is typically in a chart, this will indicate partnerships and also being of service to our partners. So there is the possibility that part of his leadership or his position as president involved being of service or in service to a partner, right? Who he's partnered with, that is a whole other question. And certainly time will tell what that was about. At the same time, this Jupiter, this partner, this silent partner that he is in service to, okay, is opposing Uranus in the 12th house. Now, the 12th house is the house of mental health. It's also the house of spirituality. We covered that in a previous video. Uranus in the 12th house has a lot to do, I hate to say this, has a lot to do with fringe elements and socio-anarchist groups, people who are very distinctly different and separate from the main population in terms of the way they see the world, the way they want to operate, and they're very independent of that. So it's almost like the Amish are here, but not really with us. They're their own distinct fringe group that kind of wants to keep themselves and wants nothing to do with our rules and ways of living. With Uranus in 12th house, this indicates there is a group, whoever this partnership is, there's also a fringe element group associated or part of this that absolutely has their own ideas about what needs to happen. And both of this, separate or together, would be putting pressure on our leader, you know, and his leadership. So it will be interesting at some point in the future to find out what that dynamic is about. It is concerning, certainly telling if it is the case, but also, fascinating. So, because the 12th house is a hidden house, and so is the 6th. These are things that you don't see out in the open. So, whatever these things are, we're not seeing them yet. It'll come out. But this in particular, that Uranus in the 12th, setting up a T square, a part of a T square to that sun or our leadership, really bothers me. Because Uranus is in Aries, and Uranus in Aries in its 12th house. So talk about anarchist groups. These are people who literally have a very specific idea about the way the world is supposed to work, and it's their way or the highway or no way at all kind of thing. Um, I'm very curious to see when that comes out. I would wait for Jupiter to go down in Aries, which is going to be sometime in 2023, 24. I'll have to check. But in 2023, 24, Jupiter is going to cross this Uranus, which should blow that wide open. So whoever this group represents, or the entities this group represents, when Jupiter gets around there in 23, in 23, 24, this should be completely exposed and out in the open. Because again, remember, Uranus is not much for hiding. Like, they are the truth bringers, as much of a pain in the butt they are. Um, so where Uranus shows up, there's going to be exposure, because that's what Uranus does. It's the lightning strike that exposes and illuminates everything. So anytime you see Uranus, it's not good at hiding. Uranus in a hidden house means that they are, for the most part, behind the scenes. But also, too, it is in Aries, and Aries does not like hiding behind people either. So when Jupiter gets down here in 23, 24, in the next couple of years, we should find out exactly who this is. And that is going to be fascinating. Okay, sorry, let's get back to the administration. So the other thing, now we're looking at the administration of the people around him. So the other thing we should in theory be able to do is look at the administration chart or the inauguration chart and see how well his administration or the whole body of Congress supports him. And here's what's interesting, because remember, we've got this big old honking T square here, which puts a lot of pressure on him and brings things to critical mass. So clearly there was a lot of dynamic action around him and a lot of pressure on him to do the right thing, which, considering how feral and uncivilized and uncouth, among the many other things that are so classically South Node, Moon, and Sagittarius, it's not surprising that he would have had an army literally at the ready trying to keep him under control, with a lot of pressure and emphasis on him to behave himself, as it were, along with, everybody else's personal agendas. And there would have been a lot of that. It's a lot of personal agendas being pushed by his partners or his servants, right? The people he put in his cabinets would have been actually applying pressure on him to do what they wanted. Interesting stuff. I can't wait for it all to finally come out in the wash, because the administration's just as dirty, if not dirtier, than he ever was. So the other thing that I thought was interesting and kind of distressing about this administration right here. So Saturn is in Sagittarius. Saturn in Sagittarius is not the best position when you want the truth. Saturn in Sagittarius is the great rationalizer. This is made, or not worse, but compounded by the fact that we have Mars in Pisces, which has a flexible relationship with the truth sometimes. With Mars Chiron together, squaring Saturn, there would have been a lot of infighting and a lot of inability to pick a direction and stay with it. So group cohesiveness and unity and everybody having the same goal and moving in the same direction as a unified thing would have been out the window. With Mars Chiron together, what you typically get is a fractured, here, put it here, you'll get a fractured relationship when it comes to mobilization. So Mars Chiron together in a person's chart or a company's chart will also always show issues of being able to mobilize and move forward without constant bickering and being sidelined by pettiness, or disorganization, which is also a huge problem here, and especially here with Saturn in Sagittarius. Saturn in Sagittarius is not known for their organization. This is further compounded by the fact, because boy, it just couldn't get any better, right? We've got Venus and Chiron, Venus with that Chiron and Mars squaring that Saturn. So again, there would have been a lot of lack of sympathy, a lot of personal agendas, and inability to focus or stay organized or committed or be a unified whole Um, and more than bickering and infighting, just a whole lot of people doing whatever it is that they wanted and trying to push their own personal agendas, without any regard for getting anything done. That's problematic in an administration. Now, I'm not a huge follower of government proceedings and all sorts of stuff, and the whole Trump administration was overwhelming. I spent a lot of time struggling to get out of bed because of the literally the irrational anger and racism this man fomented. Good grief. So, these were not fun years for me. They were very terrifying years because he literally brought up all the bad things I remember about growing up when I was younger around these people, when the race division was even more obvious. So, for those of you who do follow it or remember what was going on, maybe you have more insight into how this administration was functional or dysfunctional. That would be in keeping with this description that we're seeing here. But definitely a very dysfunctional group operating here. Now, the other thing is we've got the moon in Scorpio and the moon in Scorpio. And here's what's interesting, right? So that moon in Scorpio makes a beautiful trine to Venus and Neptune, which is probably the only saving grace here. So with the moon trining Venus and Neptune, the ability to play on people's sympathies and to garner public support would have been very, very easy for them. And certainly would have worked well to their advantage. And clearly it did. Because remember, Venus rises and rules the chart. So Venus in Pisces, conjunct Neptune ruling the chart, indicates not only scapegoats, but people who identify as victims or actually are victimized. But the whole victim complex or martyr complex, pick one, right, is very, very operative with this particular combination. It has to be guarded against. With the moon ruling the populace, us trining that Venus Neptune, in many ways we supported that image. Or allowed them to embrace that image, whether it was true or not. Because remember, Scorpio is an extremely manipulative sign, and if being a martyr or a victim is what's going to get you to do what they need you to do, they'll happily lay down and put a sword in their back. Just saying. So that's the administration. Okay, so this is a tri-wheel chart. On the inside, this is the United States chart. This middle ring here is going to represent Donald, and the very outer ring is going to be the inauguration or his administration. So let's take a look at the connections between all three charts. So we know with Donald, he is the middle chart. We've got all this happening with him, right? There's some really strong, obvious connections between the United States chart and, look at this, Jesus, and his personal chart. There's that, all sorts of stuff. Okay, now when we put the inauguration chart, his administration, on top of it, right, here's what we also get. So we get, get rid of this. I want you to see this. This is the most obvious thing happening right here. This is Donald's moon. This is the Saturn for the administration, right? This is Donald's sun. That's part of his full moon configuration. And that's Mars for the United States. So right across these three, this is so important. Use this color. We have Sun, Mars, Moon, Saturn. This is the administration. This is Donald. And this is the country. So what we have in this configuration right here, we have Donald's full moon activating the national Mars, right? So it inflames, Mars inflames. So he pushed the button, the launch button, where our passions or our anger is concerned, our rage, our resentment. It could have gone in any number of different directions, but he chose to push the resentment button and he inflamed the anger and resentment of a population. Right now, with the administration, because remember, the administration is its own entity. We can't put all this on Donald's shoulders. The administration is equally to blame, if not more so, because let's face facts. The people in Donald Trump's administration were easily more educated, more experienced, more sophisticated, and certainly more understanding of the ins and outs of what was going on, and could easily take advantage of his ignorance, and did often. Okay, so I mean, literally, they were manipulating him like you would manipulate a 6-year-old. So a lot of what went on during that 4 years, you got to hold the members of the cabinet and administration responsible for it because they're the ones who implemented policies and advised him about it to get his signature. He was literally a useful idiot on many levels to many, many people more educated and smarter than he was that were put there to help, air quotes, help him. So the administration, our lovely administration, is right here. And the one thing that they have that is the most solidly connected to this chart, right, is their Saturn. Saturn is the planet of karma and consequences, which is the same thing. So, as an administration, they had an obligation. They had an obligation to do the right thing, to apply the gold star standard of integrity and ethical consideration and taking the high road at every step of the way, which makes complete sense if you're dealing with somebody who has the expertise, understanding, and awareness of policy making in international affairs of a toddler. So if you're the only adult in the room, you have a responsibility to do the right thing for everybody because the toddler clearly is incapable of doing it. And when that does not happen, the repercussions for failing our Saturn demands, our Saturn expectations, are extremely high. So this administration has not seen the end of the fallout from their bad behavior and misuse of their positions during their time in the White House. But the problem is, as a country, because they connect us, right, and our Mars, we are also going to be dealing with the fallout from their bad behavior as well. So let's keep an eye on that because this story is far from over. And whatever happens to Trump, one way or the other, at the end of the day, he's not the real problem. He's like the front man. So if you're familiar with, um, for example, David Lee Roth, who is this beautiful, people who grew up with him remember him, this beautiful hunk of man here. David Lee Roth was the front man for the band Van Halen. They were an amazing musical band, a rock band. They were brilliantly talented musicians. David Lee Roth was their lead singer and their frontman performer. So, synergistically together, they made a fantastic team. But the fact of the matter is, once you take the front man away, even though the rest of the band is incredibly talented and brilliant in terms of their musical ability, the fact of the matter is, it's not the same thing. So, Donald Trump and his administration is literally the equivalent of the front man, him being the front man of the David Lee Roth, of a team of people who are clearly superlative in their own ways compared to the front man, which would be the administration or Van Halen. So Donald Trump is the front man for his administration and all the cronies who are using him to try and make their agendas happen, like David Lee Roth was the front man for Van Halen. And believe me, when David Lee Roth broke with Van Halen, he was sorely missed, and the band never really recovered from that. So, bit of rock and roll history for you. Okay, so here is our bonus material. This is a chart comparison between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin and the Trump administration, because the administration gets its own entity or identity for these purposes. So let's start with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. So the first thing I want to show you guys, use this color, is we've got a number of connections between these two charts. So there would have been some, there's always a sense of recognition or familiarity when you meet people who have contacts between their chart and yours. So here are some interesting things. So the first thing is that Vladimir Putin carries the Sun, Saturn, Neptune conjunction in his chart, right? Well, Sun, Saturn, Neptune, let me widen that even more. Sun, Saturn, Neptune, Mercury conjunction, triple conjunction, stellium in his chart. These are all sitting on Donald's second house Jupiter. So in many ways, Vladimir Putin lights up the financial prospects or opportunities that Donald Trump feels are available to him. So one of the appeals of our relationship with Vlad would have been a sense of promise in terms of financial opportunity. Now, interestingly, remember, Vladimir has that Uranus squaring those planets. And when we did the chart on Vladimir Putin, if you watch that video, you know that's not a great combination because it makes him extremely cold. That's a nice way to put it. So with the square that Vladimir carries involving his Uranus on the Jupiter for Trump, any opportunities that Trump would have seen would have been short-lived, brief, and very lightning quick. He would have had to seize them when the opportunity presented itself, because Vlad can turn on a dime, or a nickel, actually, a penny. His favors and his affections and also his partnerships, whether he sees you as an ally or an adversary, literally can turn on a dime. So any goodwill or opportunities you're offered by him, you have to take when it's offered, because it may not be there 5 minutes from now. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Trump saw that. And you wouldn't, unless you were looking at somebody's astrology chart or you knew them a long time and watched it happen to other people, you wouldn't necessarily see that. So the other thing is that Donald's Sun and North Node and Uranus are all with Vladimir's part of fortune. So again, financial prospects and opportunities lit up across both charts now. So Vladimir would have absolutely seen Donald as a fleeting, but certainly very well-timed opportunity for financial gain some way or somehow. But, one would assume that Vladimir is smart enough with all that Gemini in his chart. Well, not with all the Gemini, but he certainly would have been able to catch on to that very quickly. Now, also, too, Vlad's Pluto, and remember, Pluto's a generational planet, but Vlad's Pluto is definitely on top of his Mars, so there is the possibility that Vlad, and Vlad's midhaven also, that Vlad had control, or certainly controlling influence over Donald's actions. It wouldn't have been that difficult to do. And also because this sits in Donald's 12th house, again, shady background stuff, things behind the scenes, things happening in private time other people aren't supposed to know about, secrets, all of these things would have been in the domain of what Vlad, in his professional capacity, would have had over, or had hold over Donald with. I'm sure he's like that with everybody, but in this particular case, it's really prominent because the Mars in Donald's 12th house indicates a whole lot of skeletons in his closet that we still don't know about. So there's a whole lot of dirt there he never wants to come and see the light of day. And this is going to be with anybody with Mars in 12th house, but especially this character, because of his Venus-Saturn conjunction and that Mercury square Neptune and this intercepted Sun-Moon with Uranus. It's a whole chart thing, not a specific planet thing. Okay, sorry, but I digress. Also, too, interestingly, Vlad's Mars is on Donald's full moon. So remember, and here's the thing, remember about Vlad, he is Mars, 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 Mars. That man is so strongly and actively Mars as the final dispositor in his chart. It is overwhelming and frightening. So with his Mars on the full moon of Trump, it means he absolutely dominated Trump and probably scared the piss out of him. Now, why he would scare him, I don't know. I mean, Vlad scares a lot of people, but this is very, very specific to the very core and identity of who Trump is. There's something about Donald Trump at his core and identity that is threatened, because Mars is adverse actions and threats, that is absolutely threatened by Vlad. So Vlad's got the goods on him in a big way. I thought he might, but now the charts, in my mind, the charts confirm it. So we're not necessarily seeing a whole lot of, I'm not seeing a lot of love and affection here, right? And also too, Vlad's Uranus is on Donald's Venus Saturn, which, stresses him out and makes him, again, scared because there's Uranus exposes and illuminates. Venus with Saturn in Cancer, those are secrets. These are things that are hidden. He doesn't want people to know about, things that he's protecting. So I'm not seeing a lot of love and affection between these charts. What I am seeing is the very real perspective of financial opportunity going in both directions, but also I see a relationship where one person dominates the other because of their very real threat to the existence of the other person in not physical ways. So there are things that this person could potentially expose or knows or has access to in terms of secrets and hidden things that absolutely puts the other person at a disadvantage. And that too eventually will come out in the wash when Donald is completely and absolutely of no use to Vladimir Putin whatsoever. Like literally he's just dead weight. And Vlad has a bored moment one day, he will absolutely spill or get that information spilled onto the street, and we're all going to know. Because Vlad will do it for his own entertainment. But as long as Donald has even the slightest use for him, he's going to hang on to that. But once Donald is no longer useful to him, and Vlad has a bored moment, all that dirt's going to come out. So just let's watch and wait, see what happens, because there's something there. There's something there. But with that said, now let's look at the administration, because here's as big a problem as Donald was in terms of the threats to our country, right? So what is it that Vlad saw with the administration? All those senators, all those congresspeople, you know who they are, right? Well, look at this. So Vlad's Venus is conjuncting the moon in Scorpio for the administration. So Vlad had very personal connections with members of the administration, very personal, and also shared agendas and shared investments. So there's some dirt here, man. I'm telling you, we need to go back and take a look at some of these senators and their involvement with the Russian government. With that also, remember, Vlad's Mars is an overpowering Mars. Vlad's Mars is on the Saturn for the administration. And remember, our administration with that Saturn in Sag was required to follow the golden rule. Integrity was absolutely paramount for this administration if we were going to get through this safely. And remember also, it is because our administration has that Mars-Saturn square. Well, look at this. Vladimir's Mars sits dead on that Saturn squaring your Mars. So, and Vlad's Mars is 1,000 times stronger than the Mars strength in the administration chart, which means that, and it's still on Saturn, Vlad had it all over this administration. So whatever their indulgences, their excesses, their secrets, their addictions, whatever their weaknesses are, Mars and Pisces, Vlad, because it's also squaring Saturn, so these are all their weaknesses, right? Whatever their weaknesses were, Vlad would have had it all over them and would have used that as leverage to get them and keep them in line. Because there's already sympathy there, right? They're sympathetic to him. They enjoy him and what he represents, and together they see themselves as a comfortable partnership. But at the end of the day, this guy leads because he knows how to lean on their weaknesses, which are completely exposed to him. This isn't good. This is not good. Time will tell. Listen, I could be completely wrong about all of this, but time will tell. Time will tell. Okay. Now, the other thing that I thought was interesting is Uranus and Pluto. His Uranus and the administration's Pluto are in opposition. Again, transpersonal planets, things that are beyond your personal control or choices. So what this, and Uranus is the illuminator. It exposes. So at some point, Vlad is going to have the ability or be in a circumstance where he can illuminate or expose whatever their dirty, dark secrets have been, right? The machinations of the machine, how this machine has been working, because that's Pluto and Capricorn. So especially where their financial or businesses interests are concerned, he will be instrumental in exposing the dirty core or the rotting core of that machine, if that is the case. So again, that will be interesting to watch. This is further reinforced by the fact, remember, we've got that Uranus-Pluto square in the administration chart. Well, his Uranus sets up a T-square to that. This is his Uranus. Okay. So his Uranus setting up T-square to the Uranus and Pluto, he is in his own way, like Trump was instrumental in bringing the country to a point of critical mass, right? And as far as a national identity and identity crisis, and forcing us to really start looking at and paying attention to the things we've been ignoring for far too long. Putin also is instrumental in creating or participating in circumstances that will do the same thing, that will force our hand and force us to take an honest, exposed look at where the rot at the core is. Uranus and Pluto, Uranus in Aries and square Pluto and Capricorn in the administration chart shows a remarkable level of selfishness and self-serving behavior far above and beyond indulging in personal addictions and weaknesses, right? Or, seductions, whatever these little pleasures are, pleasures of the day. This is much bigger than that. This is about greed and power. And with Vlad's Uranus setting up the T-square here, okay, he's absolutely, without realizing it, he's going to be instrumental in forcing the breakdown and exposure of those elements as they were set up. So that will be interesting, my friends. We are not out of the woods yet. It's going to get colorful, but definitely keep an eye on these things. So that's where we're at now as a result of these particular players, Trump, the Trump administration, and Putin involved with Trump and the Trump administration up until this point. Now we have a whole new administration. In theory, we've got a whole new ballgame going on, but do we really? So let's take a look. Okay, if you enjoyed this video, please give me some feedback and hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. Let me know. Remember to subscribe so you can get the next videos in this series. And if you enjoyed this and you think somebody would enjoy hearing it, absolutely by all means share, especially if they're learning astrology. This will be a helpful study tool. And I will see you guys for part 4, Biden, the Biden administration, the United States, and Putin. See you then.